Economist briefing for March 2nd, Monday. The world in brief. Biden wins in South Carolina. China's PMI plunges. Today's agenda. Infected COVID-19 and stock markets. An open question. The Vatican and the Holocaust. Talking turkey or playing chicken. EU-UK trade talks. Third time lucky Israel's election. A dangerous gift. Guyana's oil-soaked election. Talking turkey or playing chicken. Today trade talks between Britain and the EU begin. Though both sides share the goal of a free trade agreement with no tariffs and no quotas, there are huge differences over how to reach it. And with Boris Johnson's government insisting on a December 31st deadline, little time is left. The biggest fight will be over fair competition. Britain says it has no intention of exploiting Brexit to undercut EU rules. Indeed, it often has higher standards. Yet the ability to diverge from EU regulation is a main justification for Brexit. The EU's response is that to allow Europe's second biggest trading partner unfettered trade access without a level playing field could undermine the EU's single market. Most diplomats expect weeks of posturing, but Mr. Johnson is threatening to walk out of the talks in June if they are not making enough progress. Some seasoned observers put the odds of no deal at nearly 50%. So here is a chart of what the pundits reckon, I think. Or have a look at it yourself and interpret it. It's from the ONS, Office of National Statistics. Oops. There we go. Tuesday, 3rd of March. Independence Day. The Consumer Financial Protection Board. Today, America's Supreme Court hears arguments that the leadership structure of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is unconstitutional. The agency, the brainchild of Elizabeth Warren, now vying for the Democratic presidential nomination, was created under the Dodd-Frank Financial Sector Reform Law of 2010 to punish deceptive marketing of payday loans, student loans, mortgages, and the like. To insulate its director from presidential pressure, the law allows their removal only for cause. Conservative organizations and Donald Trump's administration argue that this unconstitutionally limits the president's executive powers. Even if the conservative-leaning court agrees, the CFPB is unlikely to be dissolved. As conservatives once wished, the government has requested that just the removal clause be struck down. At present, the dispute looks mute. Mr. Trump has already installed his own ally at the Bureau after the previous director resigned to run unsuccessfully for the governor of Ohio. If a Democrat, especially Ms. Warren, becomes president, not going to happen now, the tables could turn yet again. Briefing for Wednesday, 4th of March. Blocked. EU climate plans. Today, the European Commission will present a law to turn the European Union's ambitious climate goals to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 into concrete proposals. It is an early test for Ursula von der Leyen, the new Commission president. Worries are already surfacing about which of the 27 members might weaken or even kill the plan. Eastern Europeans, notably the Polish, note that Westerners got rich on carbon emissions and see themselves as being made to pay the bill. Their objections could possibly be bought off if enough cash were found. But a bigger opponent might be found in Mrs. von Leyen's home country, der Leyen's home country. Germany has for years been the EU's toughest fiscal hawk. It worries that other countries might be tempted to splash out on pet projects, relabeled as green, using the climate goals as an excuse to bust through deficit-limiting rules. Much haggling remains before Europe's green dream becomes a real deal. Wednesday, 4th of March again, the world in brief. The Fed's big rate cut, an eruption in Indonesia. The Federal Reserve lowered its benchmark interest rate by half a percentage point, the largest single cut since the financial crisis. The move came after a pledge by finance ministers and central bankers from the G7, a group of the world's richest countries, to use all appropriate policy tools to combat the economic downturn caused by the spread of COVID-19. President Donald Trump recently repeated his complaint that Fed rates were too high. Benjamin Netanyahu claimed victory in Israel's election. See main stories. Exit polls give the Prime Minister's right-wing Likud party a lead of around 5 seats over Benny Gantz's centrist Blue and White alliance. Projected to win just shy of 61 seats needed for a majority, Likud and its allies may yet struggle to form a government. 2 elections in 2019 failed to yield clear winners. Mount Merapi, Indonesia's most active volcano, erupted, spewing ash all over towns and villages up to 10 kilometers away. The authorities enforced a 3-kilometer exclusion zone around the crater near the country's cultural center, Yogyakarta. They are mindful of previous eruptions. In 2010, more than 3,000 people were killed and almost 300,000 forced to evacuate. Donald Trump accepted President Vladimir Putin's offer of a summit of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, according to Interfax, a Russian news agency. Russia and America, along with China, France, and Britain, could discuss arms control, Mr. Trump's administration said last week. Inflation in the Eurozone fell to 1.2% year-on-year in February, down from 1.4% in January and well below the European Central Bank's target of nearly 2%. The fall was attributed mainly to the 0.3% fall in energy prices. The Eurozone's unemployment rate remains unchanged at 7.4%. BMW and Daimler separately announced new vehicles they said would cut the average carbon emissions of the car they sell by 20%. BMW unveiled its i4 electric coupe, meant to be presented at the Geneva Motor Show, cancelled because of COVID-19. Daimler said its new range of vehicles would help cut carbon emission, but called electrification a headwind to profitability. Thermo Fisher, an American scientific instruments maker, announced it will buy Huigen, a Dutch medical diagnostics company, in a deal worth $11.5 billion. Thermo Fisher wants to expand its disease testing capabilities. Huigen produces test kits for COVID-19, which could prove a lucrative source of income over the coming months. So, Thermo Fisher. Thursday, 5th of March. Putin and Erdogan collision course. What? There we go. President Vladimir Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan have met or spoke dozens of times since 2016, when they patched up their differences after Turkey downed a Russian warplane near the border with Syria. But none of their meetings will be as decisive as today's in Moscow. Over the past week, Turkey has answered the deaths of at least 36 of its soldiers in Syria's Idlib province, with a punishing barrage of drone and artillery strikes against the regime's targets. Syria's main ally, Russia, has so far stayed out of the fighting, but Russia's rapprochement with Turkey, which culminated in several arms and energy deals, is on shaky ground. Mr. Putin wants complete victory in Idlib, the last jihadist and rebel stronghold in Syria. Mr. Erdogan is desperate to prevent the enclave's collapse and an exodus of 1 million new refugees into Turkey. The two strongmen could agree on a ceasefire simply to kick the can down the road. 5th of March, the world in brief. Bloomberg drops out COVID-19 and business bankruptcies. Michael Bloomberg suspended his presidential candidacy after a bruising Super Tuesday brought him but one victory in American Samoa. The billionaire and former mayor of New York spent hundreds of millions of dollars on advertising but stumbled in debates and failed to woo the party center. He immediately endorsed Joe Biden, the revived favorite to rally moderate Democrats against Bernie Sanders, the left-wing senator, left-wing from Vermont. The International Monetary Fund is offering $50 billion in emergency financing to help countries respond to the growing threat of COVID-19. It says $10 billion will be available to the lowest income countries at zero interest. The World Bank pledged another $12 billion with priority for the poor. The World Health Organization calculated the disease global mortality rate to be 3.4%. Meanwhile, the coronavirus continued its world tour, prompting event cancellations and policy reactions. See main stories. Iran released 54,000 prisoners to stem contagion in prisons. Schools were closed and football matches cancelled in Italy. and California declared a state of emergency after recording its first death. Note on Iran, prisoners of war have been released as well, and who's knowing if they're accounting for them to get back. It could be a nice move for them, or an opportunity for them to release those prisoners of war and get back on good terms with other countries. In Australia, fighting erupted between shoppers over toilet paper, tissue, sorry, I thought it said issue, which people have begun stockpiling. The first company started to collapse due to the spread of COVID-19. This is a bit of a contentious reporting. Flybe, a struggling British regional airline, fell into administration after bookings dried up due to the spread of the disease. Luminous Cruising, a Japanese cruise line, filed for bankruptcy on Monday. No doubt because people have been put off by the story about Princess Diana. Was it Princess Diana? Or something princess ship with people on it. But Flybe is an issue to do with, I think, climate change, people changing on that front, but also the taxes and regulations against airlines make it difficult for regional to compete against other modes of transport. And if UK was out of the EU properly, I mean it is out of the EU, but if it was out completely right now, the government would have changed the law to say that regional airlines don't have to pay an extra tax and make it possible for them to continue Flybe, because it is important for this country to have that regional supply for at least isolated areas and some isolated airports. So like I think like maybe not Isle of Wight, but that kind of a bit out of the way kind of places. I know like East Midlands might be one. But yeah, it's a bit more than just the disease. America launched its first airstrikes against the Taliban in Afghanistan since the two sides signed a peace agreement on February 29th. In the week preceding the deal, both had promised a significant reduction in violence. An American military spokesman said that Wednesday's defensive strikes were intended to counter Taliban attacks on Afghan government forces. At his own particular contributions to International Women's Day on March 8th, Venezuela's socialist president Nicolas Maduro called on women to have 6 kids, encouraging them to give birth, for the good of the country. Once the richest country in South America, Venezuela is in an economic crisis. Between 2013 and 2018, the United Nations, some 13% of its children were malnourished, probably reported. Aviva announced a record annual operating profit of £3.4 billion, $4.1 billion, up 6% on last year. The British insurer said that it had paid out at least £70 million for recent storm damage in the country, as well as £500,000 on travel claims due to disruption caused by the coronavirus. There will surely be some of those to come. I don't know if we can do this one. Yeah, we've done that one. The World in Brief, Friday, 6th of March. Ceasefire in Idlib. Warren bows out. Today's agenda, still more to do. The Economist Glass Ceiling Index, still going for now. America's labour market, something in the air. Airlines brace for COVID-19. Foreign influence, Democrats abroad. Arms and the man. Brazil's presidential bromance with Donald Trump. In recent years, the jobs machine that has been whirring over the past 3 years, America has added 6.5 million positions. The latest jobs report published this morning is likely to tell much the same story. Analysts reckon that the economy added 175,000 jobs in February. Unemployment could fall, but don't take Friday's figure too lightly. The rapid spread of COVID-19 virus means that things are likely to turn nasty. It was only in late February that people realized the coronavirus was spreading quickly around America, so its effects are unlikely to show up in the data just yet. But it is clearly an economic drag, with restaurant bookings down and conferences cancelled by the dozen. The question is now when the impact of the virus shows up in the official statistics. Unemployment started rising long before America officially fell into recession in late 2007. Next month's jobs report will be crucial.